Anybody up at 5:30 watching the Formula One? A couple of you, and they'll be watching you. Fall asleep. So the title of the Sunday service is Love Starts With Me. Now, love starts with me. What does love starts with me mean? Does it mean the case of I'm going to get into, is this a hippie lecture about self-love and caring about myself and how I should take care of myself? Well, no, because actually, if you want to save the world, right, you have to first be able to save yourself, right? It's very, very simple. We have this idea of going out there and loving the world and we're supposed to save the world. But, if you can barely take care of yourself, I hate to break it to you, you're not in a position. If you're not in a position to save yourself, right, and you're emotional wreck or something or whatever, you're not in a position to save anybody, right? So love starts with yourself is very, very important. Now, it shouldn't finish with yourself. Obviously, it's a starting point, but it's a really, really crucial point. And it's really the starting point of anything. It's like a foundation. It's very, very important. And many times, this is an area that we fall down on, where we end up being our worst enemy, right? And we're just constantly, maybe we're just constantly critical of ourselves and beating ourselves up all the time. And then that will pour into our relationships with other people. And it just really kind of snowballs from there, right? So I want to talk about this subject. And it's something that's actually affects every single one of us on a day-to-day basis. It's very real, right? It affects our relationships, our personal relationships. It affects when we go to work and our colleagues, and it's really something that affects, and it's very, very important. So first of all, obviously there is the fall. So not all self-love is healthy self-love, right? As a result of the fall, love unfortunately has become contaminated. So there is a lot of unhealthy love. And there's different kinds of unhealthy love. I mean, you can get it into it, but if you want to do a high summary of it, one, of course, the classic self-indulgent, me, myself, and I kind of love. You're just totally self-obsessed. You'll see it today, Instagram, and I got to get all my likes, and it's just, I am the center of the universe. And my feelings are the only feelings that matter. And it's this is a classic scenario of self-indulgent love. And it's a very, very unhealthy love. Now, you might say, oh, it's really an unhealthy love, and that person is no good to anyone else. But you know what? Here's the interesting thing. If you are consumed by self-indulgent love and self-consuming love, and you're just completely, you're a drama queen, everything's a tragedy, and you use all those techniques as a way of grabbing people's attention and everything else. The fact of the matter is, you're no good to yourself. Not only are you no good to anyone else, actually, you're not even doing yourself any favors, right? You think, okay, I'm going to be a totally selfish person because I care about myself, right? Father once said, if you really understood, if you were the world's most selfish person, you'd basically live for the sake of others, right? Because that way you're going to inspire other people, and then they in turn would love you. So actually, this whole kind of self-indulgent, me, myself, and I kind of love is incredibly destructive to oneself, and of course, to everyone else, right? And it's interesting. In religious communities, obviously, the Unification Church, we're a religious community. It's not as common. Not that you rule it out, but the religious community, it's much more about the principle and truth. So you don't get it as much. And if you do, you kind of feel a little embarrassed. You know what I mean? Your parents will probably give out to you about something. So generally speaking, it's not something that, I know it's a very prevalent love, as Halvard and John and our generation would know. The modern generation today is really more self-obsessed than when we were young. When we were young, you wouldn't go talk to your parents about your feelings about anything, that they would look at you and get out, do your homework. What are you doing? That was just, so we live in this world of incredible self-indulgence and getting all your likes and you know, all of this kind of social media thing that just kind of feeds into the kind of self-obsession, right? And it's really a lost cause. Now you have to give people a little bit of an allowance, okay? If you're a young teenager and you're kind of going from being a kid and you're kind of trying to figure out who you are, right? It's okay. I mean, sometimes you are kind of, you know, if you're very young and you're kind of initially going into your teenage years, you can't turn around to a teenage girl at 12 years of age and say, will you focus on God's providence? What are you doing, right? I mean, you have to go through these phases to grow and develop. So you need to give people a little bit of slack. Obviously, a child is completely self-absorbed, right? Little baby, she's hungry, they're just going to cry and they want everyone to run around them. So it's not that, you know, we don't want to be too hard, but self-indulgent love is fine if you're very, very young. And then you go through your teenage years, you go through a little phase and you're kind of, and that's a part of the growth, but then you want to come out of it. Another form of extremely unhealthy love, which is a very, very, really dangerous kind of love. This will cause problems, is this egotistical kind of love, right? Where it's all about power and you want position, right? And you love to get into these titles and positions of leadership, right? And you're there in that position of leadership because of your own ego, right? Now, I don't think the majority of leaders in the world even are that big, so I'm not suggesting that, but you do get them, especially like these crazy dictators around the world. I mean, you know, all these super powerful, and the world's full of them, by the way, right? They only care about themselves. They'll sacrifice other people for the sake of their ego and their agenda. Don't be worried about the self-indulgent snowflake somewhere, generally speaking. They can't punch their way out of a wet paper bag, you know what I mean? But these are this is really where, unfortunately, evil and Satan takes root, right? And they could be very smart, very intelligent, very capable people. But quite frankly, they only care about themselves. They don't care about anyone else. And everyone else is just a pawn to serve their own interests, right? Now, of course, there's lots of world leaders all around the world that you can use as examples of that, but also individuals or just people who get into these positions of power. They love power. They love titles. Give me a title. You know what I mean? Give me a position of power. And they can be bright and smart and talented, and they can get themselves in those positions. But that's a really kind of destructive, kind of unhealthy form of love. And they really cause problems, you know. But then it could be on a lower level. It doesn't have to be some big, powerful leader, you know. You ever get into these discussion groups, right? And there's always one person or one or two people in there in that discussion group who just never shuts up, right? They love the sound of their own voice and they're just constantly going, blah, 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 blah. You know that? And that, you know, so they may not have to be some big thing. That's just so annoying to everybody, right? But that's a classic example of immature ego love, where the only opinion I want to hear about from you is mine. And I'm speaking and I'm really, really important. And just the basic social etiquette of I say something, you say something. It's pretty standard. And this whole idea that we all have opinions, the whole world doesn't evolve around my opinion. Other people may have a counter opinion. This is just normal, healthy love. But then the ego is just that kind of scenario, and it can be really, really frustrating. So there are two classic examples, right? Now, in terms of how do we love ourselves in a healthy way as a starting point, right? This is a crucial area. The two kind of forms of love typically are forms of healthy love, but they can be both healthy and unhealthy. The one is, I call this tough, responsible love. It's very common among religious groups, right? Especially, and not all religious, some Christianity can be a bit wishy-washy, and you know what I mean? But definitely unification is what happens. Be responsible, right? This tough, be responsible kind of love. And that in and of itself, that is a good form of love. Who's gonna disagree with that? There's a lot of benefits to kind of taking ownership, being responsible, take action, get up, make something of yourself, right? And this whole kind of and there's a lot of good things to be said with that kind of mindset. But the truth of the matter is, there's a lot of negativity too as well, right? Because the fact is, you could also turn out to be really tough on yourself. You can just use the truth, and you can use the argument for being responsible to beat yourself up, right? And put yourself on a guilt trip. This is classic. Be definitely classic mindset within the unification community, right? Because the burden of responsibility, I'm supposed to save the world. I mean, this is right. You can read the speech and you're going to feel like everything is my fault and I'm out there. And then you can really end up. And here's the problem. While fundamentally being responsible and taking responsibility on the surface is a really, really good thing, I would argue that in many cases, you see this being twisted, taken out of context, where we end up just beating ourselves up, right? We just use the truth and use the principle to beat ourselves up, right? And more importantly, we use the truth and the principle to beat other people up. Sure, why not? I'm beating myself up. I might as well beat everyone else up. I'm guilty of this, right? I'm put my hands up, right? I'm totally into this whole tough responsibility. No one's going to save me. If I'm not going to get my own act together, I'm doomed, right? That's my mindset. I'm doomed, right? I'm not waiting around, my perception of the Messiah and true parents is more like a coach. They give you the truth, but you've got to get out there and win the game, right? Then I'm going to do it for me. And I'm super into this personal responsibility and everything else. And that's like I say, that's a good thing. It's a good thing. But it has another thing. You just beat yourself up all the time. And you beat everyone else up. And you become highly, highly critical. Religious people in general are, in fairness, highly critical people. Right? And some of the criticism is legitimate. If you look at the fallen world, you can be legitimate. The world's gone absolutely mad. The fact of the matter is, in the 1960s, the world was going absolutely mad. In the 1970s, the world was going mad. I know now you got all these, I have to decide if I'm going to be a man or a woman, or all this stuff. You can argue it's going to be even crazier. So it's not that criticism and judgment on the world in and of itself is a bad thing. But going around, I remember, being on Facebook, especially in America. America is much more polarized, right? And you get all these, typically they're older first-gen male members, right? And they're on Facebook in America, and they're so polarized, and they're so resentful. All these asylum seekers, and all this and all that, and it's just such an incredibly toxic, angry, resentful, kind of like extreme right wing. Right. So if you look at extreme right-wing people, right, and you get religious people and unifications, right, who are really extreme right-wing. And sometimes I listen to them. I never talk politics on Facebook or anything else. It's like, seriously, it's just a serious mistake. But you just look at it, you just feel so toxic, so angry, And then, some of them would be people of my own age, friends and members and Carpenter. I'm thinking, seriously, where's the idea of Christianity and love and forgiveness? If they seen a refugee boat coming across, they probably shoot. Saving God. Well, you can get to that. So that's an example. This is an example where you get into this responsibility. Love is in and of itself a good thing. Okay. In my opinion. But if you really go the other extreme, you end up on this because the fact of the matter is the world is fallen. Okay, the world is fallen. I've got fallen nature, you got fallen nature, we all have fallen nature. So if I want to stand up here with a shotgun and shoot people for their fallen nature, it's very, very easy. Right? It's like shooting fish in a barrel. It's very, very easy. And we can just get resentful and we can go around judging everybody, right? And that's a very, very easy thing to do. But what are we trying to achieve and accomplish by it? Do we make them better? We do because we feel better. It's nice sometimes to just offload. Idiots. I like to drive down the road and everyone's an idiot when I'm driving. Because you're like, idiot. You know, maybe when my kids were really smart. No, everybody's name is idiot. It's a very popular name. Idiot. But emotionally, it is good. Let's face it, you know, you're venting and that's fine. And that's not a problem. A little bit of venting, but this becomes extremely toxic. And it's not only toxic in relationship to other people, because you're not going to do anybody a favor. Right? If you're hypercritical and you just want to shoot someone down, right, you're not going to help them. Obviously, they don't want to be helped by you because you're coming at them in a hostile manner. But not only that, but I guarantee you, if you have that mindset towards other people, why do you have that mindset towards other people? Because you have that mindset towards yourself. I bet you're really tough. That's how you know. If you're too tough on yourself, right? Sometimes you're not as conscious of what's going on in your head, right? And how much you beat yourself up. But you can always figure out if you're extremely critical. And I'm this one. I'm putting my hands up here, right? I'm hypercritical. And the reason I'm hypercritical is because I'm super critical of myself, right? And again, it's really a balance. There's pros and cons to it. That's why it's not that simple, right? But that's how you know where you're at. Okay, so if you're thinking, where am I at on this? Now, the other kind of love is this very much this soft, forgiving, self-indulgent love, right? And that's a good love. That's a healthy love. It's kind of like your masculine love of tough, responsible, take action, your feminine, caring, forgiving, supportive, encouraging, right? This is a very, very healthy form of love. And this is a very, very, you know, this is not self-indulgent love. Okay, so let's distinguish. That's not, sometimes you, oh, fakey, give you a hug. That's not self-indulgent, right? Being caring, being supportive, being forgiving, being encouraging. Listen, you can do this, you know, you hit a brick wall, you're having a tough time, you totally give up on yourself. Somebody comes to you. No, listen, man, you can do this. You got this. You got to be patient with yourself. You got to step back. You know, you got to be more supportive. You got to be more encouraging. It's something you need to grow into. Go easy on yourself. This is all really, really healthy love, right? And that's the healthy form of that love. And it's generally speaking, yeah, it's you can flip. The pros of that is obviously being a very supportive, encouraging, and especially if you're in situations that are challenging and difficult, right? Whether it's an event in your life that's really, really difficult, or you're dealing with something that's very, very hard and it's tough, right? Well, beating yourself up, generally speaking, if you're just beating yourself up and that's your mode of operation, you're going to find it difficult to move on to different levels and go higher and higher and higher. Because if you're in a situation where you don't have the ability and you need to be supportive and encouraging and much more patient with yourself, and you're not, you self-sabotage yourself. You understand me? Yeah. So this kind of love is a very powerful love that is encouraging. But the pros, that's the pros, but then there's negatives as well. Quite frankly, you can be just coming up with way too many excuses, right? You're constantly making excuses to yourself. You're constantly being forgiving. You're constantly loving. You're just like, you got a big encyclopedia of excuses why you don't do anything. And then you're a victim, right? It's not your fault. You're a victim. Yeah, I'm a victim. I can't take care of myself. I can't do this. I can't do that. So it's a real mixture, isn't it? You know, and they're always a victim and they all can't do this. You can't do that. That's your mode of operation. Right. And that's kind of that's unhealthy, obviously, you know, and you're always in some drama queen. There's always some tragedy. There's always some legitimate reason why you can't do it or whatever. Right. And then you never do it. So these kinds of loves, interestingly enough, they can be extremely unhealthy, where you're either beating yourself up, you're just really tough on yourself. Or you're just constantly making excuses. oh, I can't do this. I'm not so smart. I'm not so this. I'm not so. You write yourself off. And that's two extremely unhealthy states of mind. And you got to ask yourself, where are you? Now, sometimes you're in both where you're beating yourself up and you're so tough on yourself and you're driving yourself. And then what happens is you have a breakdown. You're just boom, 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 boom. And then you break down. And then you're like, oh, I can't do anything. Oh, and then you flip into the other form of love because you're physically and mentally, you beat yourself into the ground, quite frankly. You ran yourself into the ground with just being this screaming drill sergeant, just constantly in your own head, where you just have a breakdown, you're physically exhausted, and then you can't do anything, right? And then you just feed yourself this selfish, but to be honest, you're kind of like, you're not really doing yourself any favors. And that's like going, flipping from one to the other or being stuck on one or the other, right? It's not the ideal scenario. So what's the idea? What is the ideal solution for healthy love, right? What is the ideal solution for healthy love? And I noticed from my own personal experience, because professionally I'm in sales, right? And in sales, basically every month you got zero, right? And you got to hit your target. And if you're consecutively not hitting your target, what happens? They fire you. Like this is how sales is a horrible career. I was told, don't get a sale. You get fired. Can't pay your mortgage and anything else. So this is. Now you know what I mean? I'm into this tough love kind of thing. So that's fine. But even then, it's a super intense, highly pressurized thing. So I've learned from this. So I can go around beating myself up all the time and be tough. But you don't know. You're in situations and there's anxiety and there's all stress. So in this highly intense environment, one of the benefits I personally experienced being in this highly intensive environment is mentally, you really need to be in your A game. Because if you're not, you're roadkill. Okay? So this is what I learned from that. And then I understood they appreciate the balance of love. So first of all, you need to ask yourself, what camp are you in? Are you in the highly responsible, I'm going to beat myself up camp, right? Or are you in this, I'm not so, I don't know if I can do that. And you're always making excuses camp, right? You got to work out in your mind which camp you're in. And both camps, quite frankly, are not ideal. They're not ideal. Now, if I had to pick one camp, I'd pick the tough camp because I'm biased, and that is my camp. It's the only operating. But I do feel envious of the other people in the other camp. Gotta have it made. But to be honest, both camps are really, really not good. You're either too harsh, you're too tough on yourself, you're too tough on other people, and it's really, it can cause a lot of problems. So ideally, what you want to do is you want to try to aspire towards, now I'm not getting into more balance in your life. So ask yourself, am I really just beating myself up all the time, constantly being critical, constantly just really being hard on myself? Well, listen, I am no good to myself and I'm no good to anyone else, right? That's what I tell myself. I'm no good to myself and I'm not, it kind of has some benefits, which is the problem. Tough, responsible love has some benefits, right? But on occasions, and you don't get rid of one or the other. And that's not what I'm proposing. What I'm suggesting is we get a little more balance. Sometimes you wake up in the morning and quite frankly, you need a kick in the ass. You do. You're like, oh, seriously, get over yourself. Let's make this happen. Some days you need to be tough on yourself, right? And you need to kick yourself. And you need tough love, right? And that's true. And sometimes the people around you, friends, sometimes that is the case. Now, I know it's very, very hard to figure out. It's tough making a call. Sometimes you're going to make a wrong call on it. But sometimes in life, there's a lot of benefits. And you want to basically get tough on yourself on occasions. Come on, listen, you can do this. Stop making up all your lame excuses. You can do this. You got this. Get it going. Let's go on to the next level. Healthy, tough love. But when you're really crunching it, then sometimes you've got to give yourself encouraging, supportive love. Now I'm talking in a positive manner, not this kind of just, and you've got to, especially if you're doing things that are really, really hard, they're kind of outside your scope of capability, then you really got to go easy on yourself. There's no point. It's absolutely tough love will completely scupper any efforts whatsoever. If you're doing something that is really tough and challenging and you've got to stretch to do it, tough love is really counterproductive. You beat yourself up, you end up losing confidence. And at that stage, you need to be kinder, more supportive, more encouraging. And not just towards yourself, but also towards people who are in those situations. You need to read the situation. Sometimes with my kids, with our kids, the kids are doing stuff, and if they're doing so, and our family, we're just super hyper competitive. It's all Doris's fault. I'm just into love. Here, I just want them to be happy. I just want them to be happy. But Doris, German, I'm practicing with every day. Go easy on them. They're young. They need peace and love, man. Not really, though. But so it depends. You're not only administrative, but also to other people like my kids. Sometimes if they just didn't do something because pure laziness, right? I'm gonna give them the proverbial kick. Not a physical kick, but just say, seriously, what the heck's going on here? You know what I mean? You're just totally, and that's good. But sometimes they're in a situation where, quite frankly, they're really stuck, they're really struggling. It's a tough situation. That's incredibly destructive, right? And then in that situation, you give them more, okay, listen, let's sit down, let's figure it out, let's talk through it. What's the problem? What's the solution? Step by step, right? And when you do a positive, loving, encouraging environment, and the key is the balance of both. This is what I'm saying. The argument, the point I'm making, the central point of this is getting the balance, doing both, right? Sometimes you need to be tough on yourself. Sometimes you need to be tough on your friends and loved ones. Sometimes you need to be really supportive, patient, and encouraging on yourself, right? And just stop beating yourself up. And sometimes you need that support, encouragement in relationship to your loved ones and others. Now, I know it's a challenging. How I make a decision on it is very, very simple. I ask myself, it's a task at hand. If I should be doing it, I know how to do it, right? And it's well within my scope of my ability, I kick myself in the butt. Like, what the heck? Get your act together, move it, right? But if I'm in a situation which is really difficult, I'm in a very, very challenging situation, or someone else in that, then caring, supportive, and I'm going to make mistakes. If I'm getting out of my comfort level and I'm not 100% sure in that area, I'm going to make mistakes. And if I make a mistake, forgiveness, right? Okay, because if you're not forgiving yourself and you're just really tough, then well, you're not going to try it again, are you? And so that's the criteria I use in relationship to myself, in relationship to others, specifically my kids, our kids. So you just kind of use that scenario. But remember, try to get that balance. Now, for people who just beat themselves up all the time and you're just this hyper responsible, it's really, really hard, right? It's really hard to be forgiving and kind of I find it so tough. It's so easy for me. I kick myself in the butt. I could do that all day. It's very, very hard to be, to go from this responsible, tough to this caring, supportive, encouraging, and it's really tough transition, right? But if you're that type of person, okay, and you really need to step back, right? What I do to encourage myself is it's not a problem when I'm doing it to the kids or I'm doing it to someone else, but for myself, it's really tough, right? It's really tough. I'm generally just ruthless on myself, right? But here's the problem I run into, and this is what helps me, and this may help you, just to be, if you're in that scenario, is listen, I can beat myself up all day, no problem. It's not going to help, right? So when I click in my mind, okay, let's beat myself up. Hey, I do this with my sleep, no problem, right? But it's not going to work. It's not as effective. And that helps me kind of say, okay, I got to cut myself some slack, be patient. It's not that I'm just playing the victim card. Oh my God, I can't do it. And I'm just crying in my soup or something. No, okay, let's figure it out. Let's do it step by step. It's a learning progress. I'm work in progress. So let's work it out and have this more support. And that's what helps me go from too tough to a little more balanced when the occasion recurs it. Because I just realized it's just counterproductive, right? Now, if you're the other way, it can be challenging. If you're just very self-indulgent, people don't realize that this very kind of forgiving, making excuses, the self-indulgent love, the problem with that is self-esteem, self-confidence, right? You always get a case of, generally speaking, people who are tougher on themselves, more demanding, have a higher level of self-esteem. They believe they can do it. Because if you think you can't do anything, you're totally useless, then you're hardly going to be beating yourself up to take responsibility, right? You understand me? So the biggest challenge with people who are super responsible is knowing how to cut themselves some slack, be kind or forgiving, and be a little bit more supportive and challenging. The other way around, if you're constantly making excuses for yourself and you're really, I can't do anything, your biggest challenge is actually not so much tough love, but building up your self-confidence. I can do this. Right? I'm created in the image of God. Now, it doesn't mean I can do everything in anything, but you really stop having to make excuses for yourself and start encouraging and it's dealing with your self-confidence. So if you're falling into this camp of two kind of like, you know, more this kind of victim and always kind of like, oh, I can't do this kind of thing. You got to start with self-confidence. You got to tell yourself, hang on a second, stop constantly making excuses. I'm not doing myself any favors here, right? I mean, if I tell myself I'm useless and I can't do anything, I mean, I'm doomed to hell. I mean, that's just misery, right? Like it is, right? If you write yourself off completely, then that's a big, big problem, serious problem, right? You're no good to yourself, and quite frankly, it's challenging to serve others as well. So in that case, if that's your situation, you gotta have confidence in yourself. You gotta hang on a second, I can do it. Now, I'm not talking about going from one extreme to the other. If you got zero confidence in yourself, then you know, oh, I can do this. I'm creating the image of God. I can go and restore the world. No, you can't. You can barely punch your way out of a wet paper bag. Go easy on yourself. But step by step, you got to build your confidence up. I can do this. I can do this. I can do this. Right? And stop telling yourself. And for some of us, we're in both camps. Right? We got to catch that. When you're beating yourself up, you got to go easy on yourself. This is counterproductive. And then when you just give up and you totally write yourself off, you got to pull yourself up on that and say, hang on a second. Hang on. Okay, I'm not a genius and I don't know everything, and that's okay, but I'm not a complete idiot and I'm not totally useless either, right? You know what I mean? And then you just kind of have a supportive, encouraging, I can do this. I believe in myself within the context of my abilities. Be realistic with your targets. Yeah. Believe in yourself. Build up your confidence and do it. And the balance is to challenge us to find the balance. Now, listen, I am completely my own personality. I'm just tough and I just enjoy that whole space. That's the way I'm wired, and that's okay, right? So when I'm saying balance, I don't mean everyone is stuck in the middle, right? Because you're going to have a certain, you know, you're never going to turn Halvard into a snowflake, right? You know what I mean? It ain't going to happen, right? I'm the same way, and that's okay, right? So when I talk about balance, I don't want you to misunderstand it and think that everyone has to be perfectly in the mind. Sometimes you're just going to have a tough personality. You're going to be tough on yourself, and you want things to be done, okay? So what you want to do is you just want to avoid being to the extreme left or the extreme right, right? You don't want to be one of these extremists. You don't have to be right smack in the middle, right? But you don't want to be an extreme left or extreme right, because that's extremely unhealthy, right? Within religious communities, definitely the whole kind of, we're more driven towards the whole responsibility, more so than the other side. Just the whole principle and everything else in the education, right? As you get older, it's only natural. And then you don't want to extreme, and even it's in politics, in America, it's just so American politics, because this individual personality type of love extends into politics, right? And you see it in America, there's so much polarization, right? And I was listening to the people on the left and I listened to the people on the right, okay? And you talk about politics, if you listen to people on the left, the liberals, they just feel sorry for everybody, right? Let's talk about a contentious issue like asylum, right? And then they have this thing of just super, oh my gosh, everyone is a poor victim and they're all genuinely in need, and we have to pick them up from the sea and all bring them here and put them into a hotel and feed them, clothe them, and we have to love them, right? And that's extreme left, where you've got this, and it's a manifestation of this kind of love, right? And then you have the extreme right. Don't rescue them, let them drown. They shouldn't have been on the boat in the first place. They're all a bunch of freeloaders, and you get this constantly, right? Of course, the truth. And then if you're a thinking person and you do your research, of course, you'll find out that, quite frankly, both sides have a point, right? You can't just turn around and say they're all a bunch of criminals and they're all like just here to screw the system or do everything. That's factually incorrect, right? And then if you just hey, everybody, come on in, like you're really dumb and naive, right? Some of these people are coming from war-torn cities. They're dangerous people, right? You don't know who they are. They've lost their identities and they got nothing. You don't know anything. It's a major. So the fact of the matter is, so what I would say is, as unificationists, as you get into Sapiro and you get into your social media and whatever you're into, be aware of the dangers, right, of following yourself into one extreme camp or the other, right? Because I listen to all the typical kind of right-wing guys, and but once you click on one, Ben Shapiro, then boom, 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 the algorithm is going to give it to you, and then Black Lives Matter and all these poor people here and there, and then you click on that, and then suddenly you're polarized into one extreme or the other, right? Now, my own 2 cents on it is basically, it's interesting to listen to his perspectives, but even Ben Shapiro and all these high super right-wing guys, they're too extreme, right? They're too extreme. And they're too you can be too right-wing. The core of right-wing is basically people are all responsible, individual responsibility, however, right? And the core of the liberal wing, if you wanted a definition of what the ultra is, everyone is a victim, right? Everyone, you got to feed people, you got to clothe them, give them houses, human rights, blah, blah, blah. And they don't seem to be held for accountable. The truth of the matter is, I would argue that we should really be more balanced, right? On 2 levels. On personal level, we should try to be more balanced. We tough on ourselves, encourage ourselves to take action and be responsible. That's a good thing, but don't go the extreme of beating ourselves up and writing ourselves off. We may not be able to do everything and we're some superstar, but we're not totally useless either. We are capable, responsible, believe in ourselves, encourage ourselves, and be more balanced. Politically, I would also caution to be very, very wary of the unification is I make the assumption not all second gen would be leaning into that right wing, but you can get into all of this kind of this stuff, right? And there's a lot of interesting points because it is true to say that the mainstream media is fundamentally left wing. So if you read the mainstream media, you'll get that kind of, and everyone is a victim, right? And there's like the human rights is the emphasis, but nobody's talking about being responsible, right? So that's it. So what I would say to you is, on an individual level, to wrap up, really decide if you're beating yourself up all the time. On occasions, be more caring and supportive, right? And if you're hypercritical of everyone else around you, be okay. We're all charged with being responsible, but it's counterproductive. Try to understand other people and don't show compassion and compassion and being responsible can coexist. You don't have to choose between extreme right wing and extreme left wing, right? You don't have to be this completely self-righteous a-hole on the right judging everybody. You really don't. You can show compassion and love. And compassion and love doesn't turn you into some ultra left-wing socialist, right? And I believe that compassion and holding ourselves to account and being responsible can coexist. And we should make that balance, right, as individuals, and also extend that to our friends and our loved ones and the people around us. And I would say politically, don't get wrapped up in these extreme echo chambers, right? You know what I mean? These people are coming with a very tunnel vision, either responsible or everyone's victim. And you can be compassionate and you can be concerned about people, and you know, don't end up being an extreme right winger or super liberal. And then some of the second gen, they get sick and tired of all this religious thing, and then they just become ultra liberal, super left wing. You know, and you know, like you don't have to. Both choices are not healthy. Both choices, they can and should coexist and kind of align yourself. Actually, Father talked about the headwind, interestingly enough, right? Your father was not a huge fan. Obviously, religious principles politically they lead into the right wing, but ultimately, your father actually talked about the headwind and the big step, bringing the left and the right together. So that's conclusion. Individual level, family level, even politically, your echo chambers. Try to broaden your mind out. Give yourself a kick when you need it. Be supportive and encouraging and believe in yourself as well. Amen. Dearest Heavenly Father, we're so grateful to have the principle and to really to be recipients of the True Parents teaching, because the world is just it's such a chaotic, confusing world, and there's so much, there's just so many polarizations, there's so much resentment, there's so much confusion in the world. And, you know, we're really very, very fortunate to be really given clear guidance and inspiration and an understanding of the principle and just this sense of purpose and a roadmap for our own lives, that we can really live in accordance to these principles and better ourselves as individuals, better ourselves as families, and then as families really reach out and encourage and add value to our communities and the greater society around us. I suppose with this gift comes our responsibility as well. And we want to recognize this responsibility, but again, we don't want to beat ourselves up and put ourselves on a guilt trip, because we know that's not your love and that's not helpful. So I'd like to pray this in Val McCann, Central West Family. Adjunct.